Munchkins and viewers alike, it's me Munchie, and today I have a special intake video for you guys. So today's story is none other than Starlight, aka Star, and possibly the forces of evil. But I had a very special request for this surrender intake. I was contacted by a dad and his son looking to rehome their Syrian hamster named Star. Now there's not a lot of places out there to surrender their hamsters to, so a lot of the times people end up looking on Craigslist. And in this case, the family actually did see my post for all of my rehoming hamsters in my foster home, and they decided, since I was a rescue/foster home, that they would contact me first before looking. I got contacted this week for Star, and they asked me if I had any room. And of course, I did have room because I had 2 hamsters that were just adopted the same day I picked up Star. So actually, I just came back from doing all of that, and I wanted to settle in first before making this video for you guys. So Star is estimated to be about 6 months old, female Syrian hamster. So she might actually be a lot older than they estimated, but at least she's been around for 6 months. Unfortunately, the circumstances was that they just didn't have enough time to give her the love and attention. And even though a lot of people, especially online, don't like to hear that, these people were very nice and kind, and instead of abandoning her, they decided to look up somebody like me and my foster home to see if I can take her. Because upon interacting with them, they were really frightened that she would become snake food, so they didn't want to list her as free. And thankfully, it was a very pleasant interaction with this family that I'll talk to you a little bit more about later on in the video. So when first talking about Star in the emails, I was shown 2 photos, and upon seeing those photos, I saw 1, she was a very big female Syrian hamster, and 2, she was in the KT dazzling turnabout cage. And that cage is one of the worst cages you can possibly put a large Syrian inside of, but they were just unsuspecting and they did not know any better because they thought this was adequate care. So thankfully, upon interacting with the owners, that I enlightened them and I told them that these cages are so small, but in places like the United Kingdoms, they make a lot bigger and more spacious enclosures, because within the 21st century, we've learned a lot more about hamsters and their stress levels from the studies and research done. One of the studies was done on the temperature of a small hamster in a smaller size enclosure. And they did studies where a small hamster was placed in an enclosure and was given a certain thing to monitor their heat signature and their heat levels. And they also put hamsters into bigger enclosures and seeing their heat signature and seeing if they produced a lot of heat. And it turns out they were more stressed in small enclosures and produced the highest amount of heat versus larger enclosures where they produce less heat. So the more stressed out a hamster is, just like with people, if you are stressed out all the time, you're going to be feeling tired, overwhelmed, like all of these things, as well as illness and stress. And that's not good on any of your organs. So putting a hamster in a stressful situation will also increase their stress levels too, and would affect their organs as well. And hamsters are known to be very stressed creatures. So it's unfortunate that our 80s and 90s care is still within our pet stores, and our pet stores in the United States are not enriching their hamsters or giving a crapola about what the hamsters are currently being put inside of. They just like profit, they just like you to connect all the little tubes together, and this is what I got upon receiving Starlight. I actually had to put this cage together, and I found out too that this cage, part of it is broken. She was kept in here as well as being connected with another cage for her enrichment. And what the family did do was they tried, since they saw she was an escape artist, I was told, that they tried connecting tubes together, they tried giving her a little bit more, but they were just not very successful. So they warned me that she's probably going to escape, but I reassured them that within the right size enclosure, they're not going to escape an enclosure while in my care. But this right here, the top part, is supposed to be the wheel, as you can see here, because this is the first time I ever got the dazzling cage upon a surrender and or rescue. I noticed that this part right here is supposed to have a pin in it, right in the middle, so it can be propped up and keep this spinning. Unfortunately, it is broken, so it cannot be propped up and it cannot spin. So this is probably why it was not attached and was not used. And I actually got another wheel they surrendered me, which was a 7-inch flying saucer wheel, which that I can definitely use for, especially when it comes to very young juvie hamsters or baby Syrian hamsters. So that's always good to have supplies of. So I'm glad they did donate that to me. But unfortunately, this cage is broken, and it's a surprise to see how crappy KT critter trails can actually be. I've had a few good looking ones, but that's because they were brand new. But as you can tell, this family did change out their bedding often, and they did take it apart and put it back together. But all of this work, let me tell you, just putting all the tubes back together and putting this back together and taking all this apart and latching it up, it does make me a little bit drained in the end, where I'm just like, oh, I dread doing this. And I noticed when opening this up right here, the latch is kind of hard to grab. And inside, it's very small. It's like you can put my fist in here and that's about it. So no wonder she was biting the bars and acting very agitated. You don't want your hamsters to be agitated. But thankfully the family was nice enough to listen to me. They took in my advice about, yeah, unfortunately pet stores, they just don't tell you all this information, but at least now you're learning a little bit from the surrendering process. And I do like to be very kind and gentle with people who actually want to listen. Lots of you guys who have seen my past surrenders and or rescues have noticed that I talk to people differently. Sometimes I can talk to them and approach them calmly and tell them about updated information which they had no idea about and were very kind and understanding. And I also have people that just built up a wall, or there was, you know, some weird communication going on, awkwardness maybe, and or it could have been a culture thing where they were just not raised around people who absolutely cared a lot about animals and actually saw them as value or as items and possessions or decorations, which a lot of the times fish and or birds are used as decorations. But small animals such as hamsters can be used as decorations as well, which is really upsetting. You can make their enclosures very decorative, but it should be enriching them and not mostly enriching yourself. You want to enrich your hamster and provide it the best care possible, because taking care of a small animal or just taking care of any living thing should be very rewarding. But this family, I can tell you right away, definitely did value little Star. And I did ask him if Star was named after Star in the Forces of Evil. Unfortunately not, but Star does look like Star from the Forces of Evil, and so I think the name is very fitting, so I'm going to be keeping that when I go to rehome her. I also walk the family through the process of what I do, how I intake, and how I then go out and adopt these hamsters. And I also told them about the adoption process, how I screen people, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback and reaction from people who are A, adopting, or B, surrendering. So like the father said, his first idea was to go on Craigslist, and a lot of the times that could be either scary or exciting to see what is on there. So what he said was he just went on there to see and to get a feel of if anybody was looking for a hamster, but was scared that this hamster might become snake food. But thankfully today, what happened with Star is she was transported to us in this little enclosure right here that they also attached to their main cage I just showed you. And they did have food inside there, a little hide, but when I received her, she was bar biting like crazy. Unfortunately, she was just being driven mad by being transported. And of course, transportation is very stressful for hamsters anyway, so I got her home as quickly as possible. It wasn't too far away, it wasn't a very long drive, but we do have our limits when it comes to driving to certain places, just because we do not want to stress out the animal. But all these cages you see here are either A, going to be donated to a rescue and or shelter, because sometimes rescues and shelters will intake small animals, but they might not have the resources to. So even though these cages aren't adequate, giving them to a shelter can help them intake these types of animals in bad situations where people don't realize that they have other options, like say for example my foster home, which is now getting light out there and being more known to the public and into our community. But shelters, they don't have cages. So this is really great because there has been times out there where people will go and just surrender a hamster or a gerbil in a little shoebox, and it comes with no cage because the people that got them want to go and return that or want to make money off of the enclosure. So these cages will either be donated and or I'm going to keep them around for educational purposes in comparison to some better cages in the future. So upon taking Star out of her enclosure, she definitely did squeal like a little baby pup, and usually I don't get those types of hamsters unless they weren't interacted with. But just to let you guys know, if you have a small enclosure, say as this one, the only interaction you're ever going to do is just a hand, a really big hand coming into a small enclosure, and that's gonna scare an animal because it's a large thing in a small enclosed space, which is supposed to be their comfort zone. So having just this tiny opening, and that's another thing that pet parents don't understand, is when you buy your kids something small like this, if they try to interact and it keeps being squirmy or bitey or screaming at you, you're gonna lose interest and you're probably not gonna want to interact with it. So giving it the proper type enclosure and the proper type enrichment will cause good behavior, and it will create a bond with you, the pet parent, and your hamster or small animal. So that's what I really don't like about these cages, besides the awful tubes that are very small. And I'm talking about these tubes. These are the attachments, but I'm not attaching them to the cage for demonstration. You can just see right here how tiny some of these tubes are. Very small. It's like the size of my camera lens. And I don't think Star would be comfortable fitting inside of there. She is very well fed, and she was fed Nat Geo food and treats. So I'm not so sure about the crude content and the nutrition in the Nat Geo, but I do appreciate Natural Geographic and what they do and what they document. So I do believe that is good food. I don't personally use it because I use Higgins Sunburst seed mix, but I will be using up the food that was donated. Just like all surrender intakes, I always use the food. I mix it with the current food that we currently have, just so that we have food for our hamsters. We're not going to throw away anything unless it was not properly labeled and we do not know where it comes from. So just what I said, Nat Geo treats and Nat Geo food. But the only hide I ever got with her was just this hide, which let's see if I can take this out. Ah! Nope, I can't really take it out, can I? Oh wait, maybe I can. Oh, maybe, here it goes. Ah, this hide is way too small for a Syrian hamster. This is a great hide for a dwarf hamster, and it doesn't look like it got chewed up. I know there was supposed to be like a hanging ball in there, I believe, and I do think this is the Nat Geo from PetSmart. This is not appropriate. Definitely do something really big if you're getting a Syrian. Unfortunately, pet stores, they only carry hides that are very small for dwarfs, and they don't consider adding any variety for Syrians, so it's quite hard to find the correct size for Syrians. But in places like the United Kingdoms, you can find the appropriate size hides that are not just plastic, because that seems like the only thing. It's cheap, it's easy to make, let's do it. That's what it seems like in the United States. But in the United Kingdoms, there is some bigger stuff that is suitable for Syrians. But for anybody out there wondering how you can find any sort of hides, always go with a guinea pig or a rabbit hide. So that is Star's intake, and so you'll be seeing more of Star here as well as on Instagram. I do have a foster home Instagram account, so you're welcome to follow it. Please remember, guys, that is not my personal YouTube. Please do not send personal YouTube stuff for my foster home. I would appreciate it if you just kindly follow if you would like to see updates on the fosters, but please do not bug and or spam the channel and or asking if you could have a free hamster. Please don't do that, please. And if you enjoyed the surrender intake talk today, hit like to show support. Comment down below with anything you'd like to say. I do not have a PO box, so if anybody would like to donate to the cause, I do have a foster home Amazon wish list that you guys can check out. That would also be on my Instagram account for my foster home. Also, I have my own Instagram account for anyone who wants to follow that. I just post whatever I want. Usually it's my pets, not my face. I'm kind of done and over with the face posting, but hey, if you want to see my face, here it is. And have not become a part of the Munchkin family yet, please subscribe and you'll see more from me as well as other people in our community. So thanks guys so much, and I'll see you around along with Star. Bye bye.